إن الحمد لله تعالى نحمده ونستعين به ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله تعالى من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا. من يهديه الله تعالى فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ونبيه ورسوله. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. All praise be to Allah. We thank Him and we seek His help and His guidance and His pleasure and His forgiveness. And we turn to Allah for protection from the evil whispers within us and from the consequences of our evil deeds. For whoever Allah guides, none can lead astray, and whomever Allah leads astray, none can guide. And we testify that none is worthy of our worship and our devotion and our obedience and love but Allah and Allah alone without any partners, the true Supreme King. And that the Prophet Muhammad was undoubtedly His Prophet and His servant and His messenger. O you who have embraced faith, O you who have believed, Allah says, have the taqwa of Allah in your life at all times, to the extent that you can muster, as best as you possibly can. And do not die, do not leave this life except in a state of complete and total surrender to Allah, a state of Islam. To begin, after welcoming my brothers and sisters once again to Allah's favor over us of being in His house, we began 2 weeks ago our discussion, our visiting or revisiting why we believe in Him, alayhi salatu wassalam. And we said that why we believe in Him does not necessarily mean that we are doubting in our belief in Him whatsoever, alayhi salatu wassalam. But it's more about recognizing that the belief in Him is not something that is inherently born, inherited inside of you, naturally present, the same way believing in God is, for example. To believe a particular human being was the Prophet of God, you may have inherited that by whom you associate with your family members, your relatives, your circle that you grew up with, but that type of inheritance is very easily taken away from a person. As opposed to someone seeing it for themselves, being convinced of it personally, the statement seeing and believing has a degree of truth to us as Muslims. In fact, it's been reported that our Prophet ﷺ said, لَيْسَ الْمُخْبَرْ كَالْمُعَايِنِ. The one being told is not like the one seeing. And the one being told about a fact is also not like someone who sees the fact himself. And also we are talking about this subject because we believe that although we believe in the Prophet ﷺ, we have to continually climb upwards in our beliefs because there are so many factors around us that will continually work downwards against our belief. The belief could be eroded, could be eaten away like rust eats away at metal. That can happen. And because a person, even though they have enough yaqeen to be Muslim, meaning to act on what they believe, that's what you need to be Muslim, that's it. If you're acting on it, that means you believe in it. But that does not mean that the upward climb and being totally still in where you are, inside of your faith, has been reached yet. Yaqeen itself has levels. Being positive, even being positive has levels. And that's why Ibrahim alayhi salatu wassalam, he said, Rabbi arini kayfa tuhyi al-mawta. He was not waiting to become Muslim. He was a Muslim that was devoted, dedicated, practicing, and then he asked Allah in humility, without demanding. No one is allowed to demand anything of Allah. But he was asking, oh Allah, can you take me to another level? Can you show me how you give life to the dead? قَالَ أَوَلَمْ تُؤْمِنْ. He said, don't you believe? You have enough faith. The proof is in your life to begin with. He says, Bala, of course I believe, وَلَكِنْ لِيَطْمَئِنَّ قَلْبِي. But I'm looking for the stillness of my heart. To stop, to be untouchable, to be unfazable, to be beyond curiosity anymore. And so Allah Azza wa Jal showed him, because seeing is believing. And so we want to see the facts that we've inherited for the most part, for most of us, about the Prophet ﷺ, why we believe in him. So they are not eroded, so that they are not weak, so that they are not subject to attack. And we said of the first proofs of his prophethood ﷺ was how suddenly and overnight it happened. He did not perfect an art of those before him that he had access to. It all came out of nowhere. And that's why some of the simplest facts the Prophet ﷺ brought to the world that were common knowledge to a different time and a different place, like the stories of Banu Israel, they said no one would know this but a prophet. How did you know the story of Yusuf alayhi salam? وَإِن كُنْتَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ لَمِنَ الْغَافِلِينَ. Allah says, had I not told you this, you would no way you would have known it. Living in Arabia, isolated by desert, and that's why those that hear from him say, how did he know that story? That story is only in another part of the world, in Jerusalem, only 600 years ago. How did this get uncovered? So the suddenness on so many levels proved his prophethood, alayhi salatu wasalam, and we discussed that. And we discussed a little bit about how his character, how the previous scriptures foretold clearly that something was going to happen in this part of the world from the children of Ismail, a great nation, the Kaaba being built, and Zamzam being dug. All of this not for a small event. Everything was leading, including the scriptures, something big was about to happen in Mecca. And everyone knew it. And they recognized it like they recognized their own children. That was the second proof. The third proof is the actual character of the Prophet ﷺ. His reputation of honesty, his valor and his bravery was not that of a liar or a coward or anything of that sort. Him having no motives, having his public and private life so simple, so down to earth, even at the heights of his power. His optimism, his never losing hope, even in the cave, all of that leads to one thing, that he was certain about faith. And thus he was able to convey it, relay it to so many others, put it in so many people. They saw it from his character that this was not something that he was acting or pretending, or even something he believed but wasn't really sure about. He was so consistent in that. This third proof we want to discuss today, and I only rehearsed for a little bit, took 3-4 minutes because it's been 2 weeks, is look at his message, alayhi salatu wasalam. His message, analyzing his message, proves his prophethood. You know, any human being can try to be really creative and think of a philosophy, like life is strife, life is suffering, it's all a test, try your best, be nice, and put together some general values. But when you think about how the Prophet ﷺ proposes to the world a message that is so shamil, right? So comprehensive, covering everything. And we will give some examples in a minute. And then at the same time, all those wide parts are tanasub, right? Like they're synchronized. They harmonize in a way, they fit perfectly together. And then there's so much detail. You know how they say in English, the devil lies in the details? Like, yeah, sure, it looks nice on face value, but you dig just an inch or two down, oh, there's something clearly wrong here. It's filled with contradictions. Allah Azza wa Jal says in the Quran that the fact that there are none is proof that it's from Allah. أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ وَلَوْ كَانَ مِنْ عِنْدِ غَيْرِ اللَّهِ لَوَجَدُوا فِيهِ اخْتِلَافًا كَثِيرًا. Don't they reflect over the Quran, this message of the Quran? If it was from anyone but Allah, you would have found so many inconsistencies, so many contradictions, so much conflict in it. How do you have a book that's 6,200 plus verses long, and they all reinforce each other, and parts of it resemble one another, and you're doing it over the span of 23 years? This is also an issue. Some people don't realize the power, the wisdom of the Quran's message being revealed over 23 years. Allah Azza wa Jal says, And the disbelievers say, لَوْلَا أُنزِلَ هَذَا الْقُرْآنِ جُمْلَةً وَاحِدًا. They say, why didn't it come down all at once? Of the wisdoms why it came down all at once, can you imagine a person who tries to write a message, a thesis, a research in his bachelor's undergraduate level, and then when he comes back and writes another one at his master's level, and then writes one on his PhD, and now he's writing his second PhD, like 20 years later, 25 years later. When you compare all of that, will it say this is the same person? This is the same message? This is the same author? This is the same writer? Impossible. The Prophet ﷺ, he had a message, he would recite some Quran to people. Those people would hear that Quran and go back to their country and never come back to him for as long as they live. They find out later on that he died in Medina ﷺ. So he couldn't retract and refine and edit, and spoken word is so much harder than written word, and delete and edit. So that's a part of it, his message. And then look at the content of his message. He is the only person that ever came to the world with such a pure message of Tawheed. A message that is logical, a message that is clear, a message that is firm, unwavering. One God, no partners, creator of the heavens and the earth. Everything comes from him and everything returns to him. He doesn't need anyone or anything for any moment, and everyone and everything needs him at every moment. Crystal clear. قُلْ هَذِهِ سَبِيلِي أَدْعُو إِلَى اللَّهِ. Say, this is my path. He declared it from, I call to Allah. And then even when events would come to his life, as we mentioned, or may have mentioned before, our Prophet ﷺ, when he lost his son Ibrahim, as a 2-year-old, when he died in front of him ﷺ, it just so happened that the khusuf or the kusuf took place. An eclipse, a solar eclipse, took place on the day Ibrahim died. And you think, this is a very convenient coincidence. That if you want to promote yourself, not God, if your message really wasn't God, this is like perfect timing. This is like a strike of luck or fortune, as they say. All the heavens are upset because Ibrahim died. He didn't even have to say it. It was so obvious, that misunderstanding was, people started saying it, to the degree that your Prophet ﷺ has to get on the minbar, though he's going through the difficulties of losing a child, though he's not the one who said it himself, and clarify and say, why are people saying X, Y, and Z? He says, إِنَّ الشَّمْسَ وَالْقَمَرَ آيَتَيْنِ مِنْ آيَاتِ اللَّهِ يُخَوِّفُ بِهِمَا عِبَادَهُ لَا يَخْسِفَانِ لِمَوْتِ أَحَدٍ وَلَا لِحَيَاتِهِ فَإِذَا رَأَيْتُمُوهُمَا فَصَلُّوا. He said, the sun and the moon are two of the signs of God. They're not for Muhammad or the children of Muhammad that have an effect on them. Two of the signs of God. That he strikes fear to display of his power. Strikes fear in his slaves using them. They do not eclipse for the death or the life of anyone, so when you see them, get up and pray. Get up and show your brokenness to God. Show your submission to God. All he had to do was be silent, but his message was that clear. And then he comes with a belief on qadar, on faith and destiny, that everything is in Allah's hands. And aside from the benefit of that, the psychological benefit of that, the clarity of it, everything is in God's hands. And then he chose to give you a bit of the choice, but it's still his because he can cancel it whenever he wants. And so within that choice, that small bit of free will, he will hold you accountable. And then he teaches the Muslims 5 daily prayers. And the genius in this is beyond the khutbah. The same way you cannot. Some people look at 5 prayers a bit much, and at fixed times, this is a bit strict. But he knew from Allah, Allah told him, make sure they take prayer times very seriously. Because the same way you cannot all bundle up your meals, your lunch and your dinner at the end of the week, you'll die before it happens. You cannot bundle up your prayers at the end of your day. You'll fall apart before it happens. He knew exactly what the human being needed. And then he gave you a month in the year called Ramadan. To regulate yourself. Remind yourself behind closed doors, Allah is always watching even if the people aren't. And to practice a little bit of self-restraint. And then his message goes one step further and talks about zakah, and talks about hajj, a reminder of the hereafter, when people come from every direction, all the same, to stand in front of the same God, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then from the genius of his message, by the way, is that he left room for the human mind. You know, it's not just what he taught, alayhi salatu wasalam, that is such a proof of his prophethood. It's the things he refused to talk about. Because how many religions, how many philosophers, we could not 50 years ago imagine what's happening now, correct? If you would try to set a tight rule for 1500 years from now, you would totally fail. Because you have no idea what 1500 years ago is going to look like, years from now will look like. His message even had that flexibility to last and to survive, and that's why it survived. And then he spoke about down to human hygiene and clipping your nails and when to bathe and practicing medicine, and that medicine is not magic, which so much of the world believe that medicine was just khurafa, superstitions, myths. And he said no, and that's why the very first medical exams were done in Baghdad by the Muslims, because hundreds of years before that, our Prophet ﷺ said, whoever practices medicine without being skilled, whoever practices طب, وَلَمْ يُعْلَمْ مِنْهُ طِبٌّ فَهُوَ ضَامِنٌ, he's liable. Meaning you can't wing it. He knew that medicine was a system that is to be mastered. And he alayhi salatu wasalam said, مَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ مِنْ دَاءٍ إِلَّا وَأَنزَلَ لَهُ دَوَاءَ عَلِمَهُ مَنْ عَلِمَهُ وَجَهِلَهُ مَنْ جَهِلَهُ. Allah did not send down a disease except that He sent for it a cure. There's a cure for everything. Don't walk away from patients. Keep trying. He said whether you know it or you don't, but He did send it. And that's why the medical renaissance began. You know, when the Crusaders came back in the 11th century, 400 years after the Prophet ﷺ, they write in their books, and the records I can give you, that they brought home, 400 years later, a beautiful custom to Northern Europe. And that was the Turkish bath. The Seljuk Turks, they were the Muslims in charge. They brought back the bath. They were not bathing, they were not washing. They would put on clothes and keep them on until they ripped off. That's why the wabā, the plague, would take Europe time and time again. This was also learned from the Muslims. All of this message, you know, by the way, even the study of human history was preserved, these are not my words, was preserved by the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. You know, there's a professor in Yale University, his name is Rosenthal. Professor Rosenthal, he writes numerous books, on the fact that the world had given up on history. Like there's no way to know what happened in the past. Let's stop trying to investigate world history. Let's stop trying to understand how people before us lived and what their mistakes were and how to make tomorrow better than yesterday. He said, and this was only saved by Muslim culture. Because the Muslims believed strongly enough through their Quran that they had an accurate start point for history. We had some general information. We had accurate stories of the prophets. Accurate facts here and there. And so it gave people enough interest that it's possible. And they built from there. They built on that. So even history, even the existence of Europe was based on the message of our Prophet ﷺ, who could not read, nor write, nor saw Europe, nor could imagine it, hundreds and hundreds of years before that. صلوات ربي وسلامه عليه. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم. الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ونبيه ورسوله. Also of the proofs of prophethood, are his accomplishments, his injazat alayhi salatu wassalam. As he promised, لِيُظْهِرَهُ عَلَى الدِّينِ كُلِّهِ, as Allah promised to make it evident, clear, over all religions, all faiths. What was the accomplishment of our Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam? Because some people may overlook this. And I wish to remind my brothers and sisters always that playing with your phone in Jumu'ah will invalidate the reward of your Jumu'ah. When the Khatib is speaking, it is your duty to try your best to find something of benefit to extract from his words, to benefit you for your week and beyond, inshallah. And the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man massa al-hasa faqad laqa." Whomever keeps playing with the pebbles, the masjid was pebbles at that day and age, whomever has participated in idle speech, meaning he has rendered his Jumu'ah, the reward of his Jumu'ah, useless, even if it's valid. Valid, but no reward from it, no fruits. And so, what was the accomplishment of our Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wassalam? if you think about it correctly, there was no one accomplishment you can pick. Like, he was not a great general, alayhi salatu wasalam, only, because there were great generals in history. He was not just a founder of religion only. There are people that have founded religions. Very few, but they've done it. He was not someone that's just a source of inspiration for so many people because of one event in his life. Like the crucifixion in Christianity. That's the one scene that defines a whole religion. That wasn't it. In reality, what made the Prophet ﷺ's accomplishments so special was that he was all of this in one man. That is what is different. And we should always keep mind of that because so many non-Muslims have kept mind of this. You know, in the book that Muslims love to quote, The 100 Greatest, by Michael Hart, to keep it very brief, his explanation is what? He was trying to chart the 100 greatest, most impactful people in human history. Influence, whether you like them or not, is not his discussion. How much effect have they had? Number 1 out of the 100, he said, was Muhammad, alayhi salatu wasalam. But why? He said, I know, because it's politicized, politically, contended with. It's bad press. It doesn't follow the foreign policies of our country. He's an American historian. He says, I know a lot of people are going to get upset at me for picking Muhammad, alayhi salatu wasalam. But the issue is, he was the only person that was supremely successful on the religious and the secular, the political level. I couldn't find anyone else in human history that was able to do that. Jesus Christ was successful religiously, right? But he was fought off by the people and he couldn't hold his ground. According to the Christian tradition, he was killed. Isaac Newton was extremely successful. He's number 2. Jesus is 3 in this guy's list. On the secular level, inventions-wise, great influence. Everyone's dependent on it, on his discoveries today. But on a religious level, people do not consider him a source, a legitimate source, to inform their religious views. You know, another French historian, he says, it's not just what he accomplished. He said if you look at what he tried to do, he tried to control, if you will, address, have a say, guide every single aspect of a human being's life. He said if that humongous goal he has, and then you look at what kind of resources, the means, he said if those are the 2 ways to measure greatness, can we really say any man is greater than Muhammad? Alayhi salatu wasalam. This is Alfonso de Lamartine's statement. A man by Draper says this is a person, J.W. Draper, was a huge historian here in the West. He says in 569, a man named Mohammad was born. He says who has influence, exercised the greatest amount of influence on the human race ever. And it just might, these are his words, it just might entitle him to the title, it just may justify the title, a messenger of God. Alayhi salatu wassalam. These are people who understand how to compare and accomplishments of people. The last of them, also another man, his name was Bosworth Smith, and forgive me for quoting so much of these in a khutbah, but it's important for you to know how easy it is to recognize there's something unique here. He said this is the only person, he says by a fortune, Bosworth Smith says, by a fortune absolutely unique in human history. No one's ever done this. He was the founder of a state, a country, and then an empire. All the countries went under him, and the religion in one person. He said he was the Pope without all the formalities of the Pope. You don't have to go through 1,000,001 loops to get to him. And he was Caesar. He was the king of Rome without the armies of Caesar. He said, none of this makes sense. This was your Prophet ﷺ. How does someone accomplish all of it together in a 23-year life? And it wasn't not just that. Our Prophet ﷺ, of his accomplishments was that he was the most loved man in all of human history. You know, one time when they were debating with the famous Ahmad Didat, rahimahullah, they said to him, no one is loved more than Jesus, with 2 billion people loving Jesus Christ, peace be upon him. He said, you have 2 billion people that profess the love of Jesus, where we have 1.5 billion people that practice the love of Muhammad. alayhi salatu wassalam. What is you moving tashahhud in salah right now? Are you not giving precedence to his loving, his guidance, his lifestyle, his ways over anybody else's? Why do we Muslims sometimes put up with being looked at weird for dressing a certain way or growing a certain beard or otherwise? It's out of our love for Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. We don't care if it's consistent with culture across time and space sometimes because we love him that much. Nobody has ever been loved by him. And if you rewind to the love of the companions, it becomes even clearer. Taking arrow after arrow in their backs, becoming paralyzed without hesitation, being informed their family members have died, and they say, no, where is Muhammad? Alayhi salatu wassalam. That was of his accomplishments. And of his accomplishments, and with it I close. And we move on to his prophecies, the things that no one could have ever known, that he spoke day in and day out, and they unfolded exactly as he said them, in detail, without ever messing up, without ever being mistaken in his prediction, alayhi salatu wasalam. That will be for our next khutbah, inshallah. But let me say the last of his accomplishments is that he accomplished all of this. So it wasn't just a message that was theory, that was advanced, beautiful, so impressive, but he couldn't apply it. Our Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam, he revolutionized the human race in just one generation. Who do you know takes a whole society from alcoholism and overnight it's gone? In this country, 100 years ago, we tried this and we failed. The laws that tried to abolish drinking failed, and so they tried to put lighter laws. Because they couldn't, they weren't able to shut down the industry. He shut it down in one generation. Who do you know has ever been able to remove racism from a society? He did it in one generation. Who do you know has ever been able to get people to stop killing their babies for whatever reason? Either they're afraid to be poor, and the abortions are everywhere nowadays, or they just prefer boys over girls, and that's still prominent. Do you know for the past 100 years, with the ability to have extensive surveillance and the tightest laws and the advancement of technology, people are still killing. That culture still exists all over in India today. They're still not able to stop it. He, alayhi salatu wasalam, stopped wa'dul banat, female infanticide, killing babies when they find out they're a girl, in one generation. And these people were not just ready for a button to be pressed. These people were a people that had savagery, had brutality, had lack of organization, lack of civility in their bones. Our Prophet ﷺ was sent to perhaps the most difficult people, the Arabs of Arabia, so that the transformation that will happen overnight is just so impressive. And that's why Allah Azza wa Jal said, لَوْ أَنفَقْتَ مَا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا مَا أَلَّفْتَ بَيْنَهُمْ. You spend every penny on earth, you wouldn't be able to pull this off. Pull these people together and unify them, and turn them into a bright spot for planet Earth. If you spent everything on earth, you would not be able to mend their hearts. وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ أَلَّفَ بَيْنَهُمْ. But Allah mended all of these warring, brutal hearts together. That was of His accomplishments. From people that could bury their daughters alive as they stared into their eyes. People that would kill each other over a drink of wine. People that were worried about their food and their drink and barefoot and cold and naked in so many respects. To people who spend their nights, their tears streaming down their cheeks, longing for Allah, reciting His word, and living their day giving up for others, selfless, sacrificing, riding out to all the tyrants, liberating humanity, allowing them to enjoy their freedoms, caring about a bird and a little animal. This is his accomplishment, alayhi salatu wassalam. He brought out of that, كُنْتُمْ خَيْرَ أُمَّةٍ أُخْرِجَتْ لِلنَّاسِ, the very best generation that ever came out to humanity. These are his accomplishments. This is of the strongest proofs of his prophethood. Who can match it? It's a standing challenge. No one would ever come close. May the peace and blessings of Allah be upon our Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wassalam. May Allah fill our hearts with conviction in him and cool our hearts with certainty in him alayhi salatu wassalam. اللهم املأ قلوبنا حبا لك وإيمانا بك وبنبيك. اللهم اهد قلوبنا لمحبتك ومحبة نبيك. اللهم اغفر المسلمين والمسلمات وانصر المؤمنين في كل مكان. اللهم دمر من قصف أصحابنا وأولادنا ونساءنا في الغوطة وفي ميانمار. يا الله نسألك بأنك الله الواحد الأحد الفرد الصمد أن تنزل بأسك وانتقامك على من بطش بنا يا ربنا. اللهم يا منزل الكتاب مجري السحاب هازم الأحزاب اهزمهم وزلزلهم وانصرنا عليهم، واملأنا يقينا بك، وارزقنا صدق التوكل عليك وحسن الظن بك دائما يا ربنا. اللهم إنا نسألك الثبات في الأمر والعزيمة على الرشد، ونسألك شكر نعمتك وحسن عبادتك، ونسألك قلبا سليما ولسانا صادقا، ونسألك من خير ما تعلم، ونعوذ بك من شر ما تعلم، ونستغفرك لما تعلم، إنك أنت علام الغيوب. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد.